Welcome back to College Football Addiction. We talked a lot about BYU hoops recently, and obviously their run ends with just the most insane shooting performance by another team that I've ever seen. I even saw BYU people tweeting like, well, that luck ran out for Alabama pretty quick. Well, I don't want to call all of it luck, but there's a little bit of luck when you hit that many threes in one game. Can you put I know fans hate moral victories, but what's the success level? Like, was this season successful for BYU?
So much so, and it was not going to be when they started in conference with a losing record, and then they became the story of March. I'm going to stand behind that. That's why I keep talking about BYU basketball this year. The Arizonas and Kansases and Baylor and Houston, we expect them to be in the second weekend. We expect them to be in the Sweet 16, the Elite Eight. They are very good basketball programs, and even Texas Tech has been a dominant force, made the national championship a few years ago. BYU, where did they come from? They walked into the best conference in college basketball and immediately made an impact, which I don't think anyone, myself included, could have expected. And then when there were no double-digit seeds or upsets, the only one was John Calipari, BYU got to become this big story of March where the Tater Tots guys running out there and this team of gritty BYU players who got it done against Wisconsin despite the refs being against them just find a way. And all of America is kind of rooting for BYU, which wasn't necessarily the case in years past. Jimmer Fredette was kind of their one flag of BYU getting to be at the top of college basketball, or really the top of college sports altogether. And this was the resurrection of that, showing that now that BYU is in a power conference and has the 16 fan bases in the Big 12 rooting for it, it's become contagious. The entire country got to get behind it. So a massive success for Kevin Young in year number one, where most coaches at BYU couldn't win a tournament game if they tried, couldn't even get BYU to the tournament. They've only been to a couple of Sweet 16s. Kevin Young did it in year one. Very impressive for BYU, and it showcases where they're going moving forward. This is the single most dangerous program now in the Big 12, possibly in football, definitely in basketball. Reason being, they just landed the number one player in the country, and their NIL investment is insane. People want to see BYU win. Their donors want to see BYU win, and the Cougars are going to continue to win because they have the money to do so. Jerem Jordan came on my show. Mo, I'm going long here. Oh, this is a soapbox, baby. Jerem Jordan of BYU TV came on my show, and he said to me, previously BYU wasn't doing any of this dirty money. There was no dirty laundry at BYU. Obviously, look what the school stands for. Now, money above table, where like everybody can see us doing. It's legal. I've got this money in my hand. It's legal to just hand it to this kid. We're gonna do it all day. We're not gonna hide it. We're gonna tout that BYU is rich. That BYU has a commitment to athletics. Who cares that oh well, you just paid for your yes. Everyone's paying for their team. That's what you can do with NIL, and you're not just throwing money away. BYU, they are paying players who have committed to an honor code. Players who have committed to doing things differently at BYU, to having their faith or a faith at the center of how they do athletics. That is hard to say yes to for many athletes. That's hard to conform to, and BYU is very strict about it, and I admire their commitment to faith. So, hey, you come here and you adhere to our rules. You accept our culture at BYU, which is very different from even a Utah or a Texas Tech or other Big 12 schools. You do that, you're earning this money for the way that you build our brand up. You're earning this money. We're not just giving this out to win. We're doing this for something much bigger than that. That's the message from BYU, and it's public now. The Cougars have a whole lot of dough, and that's going to go a long way, especially with Kevin Young as the head coach.
When you look at them next year, a really early look, I know we're not even out of March yet and the Cougars are eliminated, but when you look at next year, when you look forward to November, what kind of year do you expect out of them next year? Talk to me about some of the guys coming back that are big-time returners and anything else they may need to add to the roster for another run.
Well, they've already gotten one piece, a kid who was on the under-21 team in France who will come into BYU and immediately be an instant impact. We love the European players here. That for some reason now in basketball, the European players walk in and day one, they're just really, really good. And there are question marks still around Igor Demin. If Yegor Demin comes back to BYU, which I didn't think was the thing Jerem mentioned again on my show, that Yegor had a decision, and a couple weeks ago we thought maybe he'd come back. Then he had a great March Madness run, and so he should go to the NBA. I've always thought he's a surefire NBA guy. immediately after his first year in college. But now with AJ DeBonsa, the number one player in the country, coming in, Yegor's like, yeah, man, I kind of want to play with him. I kind of want to keep doing this, and I can still make a good chunk of money while I'm here at BYU and get an education. Then the other big name, he was so famous for the tater tots, but before the tater tots deal happened, I knew that Richie Saunders was a baller. Anybody who knew ball, with or without tater tots, really liked Richie Saunders, and he can come back. 6'5" junior, KSL.com wrote an article detailing who all BYU could see return. They've mentioned that with DeBonsa coming in, that's a major factor for Demon to return, a major factor for Saunders to return. I don't see Saunders going to the NBA right now. I would put his shot at coming back to BYU at about 90%. He would not enter the transfer portal. He's a BYU guy. I don't think he's ready for the NBA. I believe he knows that. And why not come back, make money, be the face of the program next year, and help BYU win? So they're only adding 2 freshmen. They're losing 4 or 5 guys. They lost Cannon Catchings to the transfer portal, which I don't love, but I also don't hate. Sometimes there's positive attrition. There are folks who leave your program and you're ultimately better because they left. Best of luck to Cannon Catchings wherever he goes. The rest of the guys who are leaving, who are just too old to stay at BYU, who have run out of eligibility, they will be replaced out of the transfer portal, because with only 2 true freshmen coming in, that leaves you a lot of room to be picky and get the pieces that you want. But honestly, based on what they have coming back, Trevenell leaving or Mag leaving, Traore or Stewart leaving, what they have coming back, I don't know. I don't know, TJ, that they need an all-star transfer. They can build off of what they have in-house and be an elite basketball team next year, especially with DeBonsa. And if Demon comes back, they just need to build small pieces around their current core. They don't need a world beater. To me, go get the best player in D2 who's a sophomore. Let him play 7 minutes per game next year and then become a star his senior season. Go find that piece, that kind of guy. You don't need someone who's going to break your NIL bank and become a program builder or breaker. You just need to stick with what you're doing. I think Kevin Young knows that.
Where do they rank way, way early? I know there are other teams up there, Texas Tech. Where do they kind of rank in your way, way too early view of next year? I know other pieces will move around to their programs, but how do you view them? Top 5, top 3, top 2?
Oh, yeah, top 3, no doubt. And the reason being, we know more about BYU than we know about Arizona State, than we know about Baylor, than we know about Kansas. We know more about BYU than we do even about Houston and where the Cougars will go as they start to lose some of these guys to the NBA or those who have run out of eligibility, because of what we understand and think about where BYU will be and who they'll have back. You have to put the Cougars in the top 3. Now, that can shift. Immediately, Baylor could land the top 3 transfers in the portal. They're going to try to. Kansas could land the top 2 or 3 transfers, or Kansas could add a couple of guys that become these wily veterans. The 4-year guy out of Western Kentucky who averages 13 points per game, and maybe he's not a top transfer, but he's a program builder. That could push BYU back, depending on the moves that they make over the course of the next month. But as it sits, because we are so confident about who will return, because we are so confident about what BYU has coming in with AJ DeBonsa, they have to be top 3, even with the number 1 player in the country, a guy who should be the number 1 overall draft pick in the NBA being in Provo next year. You can't put that team below 3 in the Big 12. They might even be at number 1 as it sits. It's just very hard to rank anybody anywhere before we see how high school recruits and transfer portal recruits evaluate their NIL, what universities they choose. From then moving forward, we have a better idea. But right now, BYU still has to be top 3.
A fun year for BYU, not just like you said in football, but also in basketball. They were a ton of fun to watch, and I know Cougar fans will be excited to see them after a long off season when we hit the field back in August. So, Drake, where can people follow you? Where can they find more of your content?
Yep, at LO Big 12 or at Drake C. Toll on Twitter and wherever you find your podcasts with Locked On Big 12. And let me say, TJ, I know that you and I have talked a lot about BYU here recently. I want to emphasize again, This is as if we've watched a lot of schools, Cincinnati and UCF, Stanford or SMU, that have bounced around to different conferences or moved up and down and all around, and very few of them have seen this kind of success at the power level. The reason we keep talking about BYU, the reason that we're very high on the Cougars, is they are doing something extraordinary. They're taking independence and coming from that land of wilderness. They're taking, the WCC with Portland and San Francisco and turning it into massive success on the football field and the basketball court. I don't know if we've seen this kind of jump in maybe college sports, major college sports history. BYU's done it day one.
Been pretty impressive to watch for sure. Drake, I appreciate your time, buddy.
Always, TJ.